Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Community Infrastructure Service Committee for Monday, September 11th, 2017. We do have 8 items on consent items. Do we have a mover on consent items? Councillor Etherington, Councillor Gazzola.
I wasn't going to move it. I have questions on 3 or 4 of the items. That's all.
Which ones do you have questions on?
On 1, 2, 3, 4, and 7.
1, 2, 3, 4, and 7?
Yeah.
All right. Councillor Davey? Councillor Yaneski, you have questions too on consent items? Okay. All right. Do we have a... Do we want to vote? We're going to vote on that. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Okay. Councillor Singh?
No, I had questions for item number 1 as well. So.
Councillor Gazzola, you want to ring in? We'll start off with item 1. Do you have anything on item 1?
Yeah, I have a sort of a general question on it. I'm trying to understand where we're going here, and we're not having any discussion on it. Just give me a chance to... in a way, it seems that we're moving faster than we're required to move. What's the thinking behind that? Is it possible that we should be slowing up some of our growth rate? Can someone...
Can you repeat your question, please?
It seems to me that we're growing faster than even all our goals and we have a goal. What was it? I was reading was it 200 jobs, and we're at 187 now, and our goal was 200, and it's been increased to 225. That's our goal by was it 2031?
Ms. Goss?
Through the chair, that's a pace of growth that we've seen. It's an average growth, so we're well positioned to continue to grow to 225. I wouldn't suggest that the rate that we've been growing is leaps and bounds beyond what we're capable of accommodating, nor is it leaps and bounds that we're going to be well in advance of the 225.
We're at 187. We've got about another 25, 38 to go in 16 years. And if we're growing at 7, 8, 9 every year, doesn't that seem that we're... it's somewhat of a theoretical question. With so many things facing us, do we ever stop to say maybe we're growing a little too fast?
Through the chair, we do have a growth management program in place as well that we table with you every 2 years, Kitchener's Growth Management Plan, where we do evaluate the pace at which we grow and the locations in which we grow and the timing of our growth with infrastructure that's required for that growth. That's a plan that will be brought back to you towards the end of October this year. I would still suggest that the pace that we're growing at continues to be an average, and it's something that we can accommodate. The numbers that the councillor are referring to is a target for our downtown only. There are other intensification areas in the city that we do continue to see growth in. We do have the space and the land appropriately zoned to accommodate that growth.
Okay, on page 120, we talk about 6 goals. Are those goals listed anywhere? There a couple of them are listed on page 120, but are the other goals listed anywhere?
Through the chair, those are goals that were identified in our growth management strategy that was prepared in 2009. The goals that are listed in the monitoring report are ones that remain outstanding or are not complete. For a full list of the goals, they are available in our growth management strategy, and that is something that we can recirculate to council after this meeting.
All right, thank you.
Do we have any further questions on item 1? Councillor Davey? You're not... Oh, just hold on. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Anitis. My concern is less the rate that we're growing at and where we're growing. I'm hoping staff can provide some assurance. I'm looking at the graph on page 1-12, which shows our intensification level dropping off significantly over the last few years. And on the page just before that, it says that our intensification level currently is at just 37% when the region-wide target's at 45%. And it goes on to say that we can expect that to, I'm taking that it's going to be trending downward as a result of the greenfield development. So I'm wondering how closely we're looking at this. And when I look at some of the initiatives we're putting in place, like the Rhine study that could run counter to intensification, is staff going to be looking at how we can solve this problem?
Through the chair. So yes, our annual intensification level that we reported on in this report was 37% in the built-up area. And so while that value is lower than the value reported last year of 44%, it is in some ways expected, as we've been getting a lot of the build-out from recent and newer subdivisions in the greenfield areas in places such as Rosenberg and Dune South. Some of these areas had gone through a lot of other development processes in the past, such as subdivisions and registration, so it does make sense now that some of these are coming online and to be built sort of in this time frame. We also did see a lot of units created within the built-up area over the past year and can see some higher concentrations of units for multiple dwellings and things like that in the downtown areas, in and around those areas. And given that the timing of development applications is a major factor in the numbers that you see here, and in the annual intensification levels that we report on, staff tend to find that a 5-year average is a better metric to look at to see if we are on the right track. And so our current 5-year intensification level is 48%, which is in excess of the regional target for the entire region's area of 45%. And it's also generally consistent with sort of where we've been in the past.
Okay, I'm comfortable with that. I do highlight it because like the trend does show clearly in recent time it dropping down. And I guess I was looking at staff's own, the consultant comments, I guess, on 111 signifying that it looks like it's like, instead of like just looking at the 5-year average and ignoring everything else, it looks as though it's going to be decreasing, intensification is going to be decreasing based on the greenfield growth. So it's just something I thought is important to highlight so we can look at potential ways to increase our intensification going forward.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Singh?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I had a similar concern as Councillor Davey in seeing the report and the intensification levels for development as opposed to greenfield. And I appreciate the answer that was given, but I think where I'm still stuck on is 1-12, and Councillor Davey surely alluded on this as well, seeing the overall trend from 2013 till now. We spiked at 60%, I think back in between 2013 and 14. But the issue is we are trending downward. And is that any emphasis on our overall policies and the directions that we're taking with intensification? Now, the reason why I pause to ask this question, growth overall is, I think, good, especially as an area. We have one of the lowest unemployment rate. I'll give the credit to Councillor Davey. He just brought it to my attention this morning. We were talking about this, and if I'm wrong, it's your fault, Councillor Davey. What he had said was we're lowest in Ontario and second lowest in Canada. So it clearly shows that there is capacity for growth, especially in the strength of employment. And if you're going to have that growth, it's better to have it in our built-up area where we have infrastructure already in place, as opposed to where it will cost our tax base now and in the future. So I'm not satisfied with what I'm seeing in that graph. You gave an answer, but if you want to focus more on the graph, that would be appreciative.
Through the chair, from a policy perspective, I would suggest that we have the appropriate policies contained within our new official plan. We have strived to achieve a minimum intensification target of 50%, which is higher than the region's mandated target and higher than the provincial growth plan target. in our official plan. The policy framework, I would suggest, is there. A lot of this is at market demand, so we can't control the pace at which development is growing. We do have the policy framework in place and incentives in place in downtown, and are working through a process to put zoning in place so that process is limited in terms of applications that have to come through council for approval. So we are doing the right things to set the stage to make it easier for the growth to happen. We're just in a time frame right now where our designated greenfield areas are at a place where the subdivisions are draft approved, many of them are registered, and they are coming on stream. So it's, from our perspective, it's not unexpected to see a dip at this time frame. Our hope, and we do believe, that the intensification level will go up as our greenfield areas start to kind of build out and taper off.
As a philosophical answer, I agree with what you're saying. I don't have any objection to it. But again, it can be interpreted in two different ways. Our policy can say one thing, and the market, what the market requires, can say quite differently. You're absolutely right. When we set low densities on a built-up area, when we have high costs for DCs, as well as you have other engineering fees and parkland dedication fees, they can speak a whole different ballpark. So that's why I'm saying, are we approaching it and saying, okay, our policies speak to strengthen and supportive of higher growth in our intensified areas, but are we supportive of what the market needs as well? Are we seeing it that way? So we can say in our, articulate the fact that we want more growth, but if, again, the density targets for what the cost per land is, it's not there yet. It may not be there yet for a long time. If the costs for the land, as well as, of course, all added hard costs too, make it a little bit more prohibitive, or the business case not to make sense, as opposed to greenfield land, we're going to see continuation of building out as opposed to up inward. So are we looking at that? Are we objective of that?
So through the chair, I would suggest that, yes, we are looking at that through our growth management strategy and the ongoing growth management program we have. This report, no, it does not examine that. This is a monitoring report that looks at how we've performed over the last year. But yes, staff are cognizant of those concerns, and it is stuff that we do talk about and analyze as part of a preparation of our upcoming growth management strategy update.
Well, we should be careful of that concern, of that downward trend, and through my question, I hope staff will take as my comment as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any other further questions on consent item 1? Okay, that's great. Do we have any questions on consent item number 2? Okay, Councillor Gazzola.
Yeah, first, I want to comment that this is a topic that we discussed in caucus, had a very lengthy discussion over an hour long and whatnot. I learned a great deal from those discussions, just general knowledge things. I'm surprised to see this coming here as a consent item without really dedicating any time to discuss this. I think the public should have the opportunity to hear about all of these things, and I think it's sort of getting sloughed by. I don't disagree at all with any of the things that are happening, but they are sort of substantial. So I'm going to start off by, there's a schedule on, I'm trying to understand where we're going here. So from what I understand, we're approving a new 4-year contract. We're also approving the write-off of some $209,000, which relates to back a year or so ago, but that will impact this year's budget. I'd like to start off by referring to the schedule on 2.6. If I can I'm trying to see where are we going to be in 2018 compared to 2017. So if I follow through that schedule on 2.6, I'm not sure what does it mean that if I add and subtract those things there, I don't come up with the same answers. So what is We know that we have a $209,000 problem right away we're going to take into account in 2017, but what happens in 2018? What's the impact on our budget? Am I clear, or is that confusing? And while we're looking that up, I find it interesting that the Humane Society is having real problems. We deal with a population figure. In the previous discussion report, the population shows as 251, and here we show a population of 233. There's a disconnect
Ms. McNeil?
from one report to the next.
Through the chair, the census population number that we have arrived at here was provided through the census information. So it was the last census that was done. That was the number that was provided to us.
Okay, and the other one is from the regional government, I take, right? Yeah. Okay, that sort of explains that. That's fine, but can you just tell me now? Go back to what is the impact?
Through the chair, the impact will be $295,579 for each contract.
So this year we're going to. So how is that? What kind of an increase is that? Is that a 5%, a 10%, or just to give us some?
I apologize. Can you repeat that last
No,
part?
what kind of an increase is that? The dollar value of increase is close to $300,000. Is that a 5% increase, a 10% increase? And this is a sort of, if I'm not wrong, this is a one-shot, and then in the future, going forward, it's going to be increasing by the Consumer Price Index?
That's correct. It will be increasing by the Consumer Price Index moving forward. For this year, we are proposing the $295,000 plus the $209 that they've asked for. But moving forward, it would just be that $295.
Yeah, but what is that $295? Can we tell what we're going to have to pay next, what we paid this year?
So this year we would pay the $913 minus the $295.
Okay, if that's the case, we're going then from 913. We're going from 617 to 913, which is a 48% increase. Okay, I appreciate and understand the reason for it, the necessity for it. I don't like it, but I understand it. I'm just trying to make it clear for everybody to understand, to see where we're going and why we're going there. You know, I question at the point. You know, is this something we have to do? Do we have any choice in this? And it was clear to me after the discussion that yes, it's a responsibility that the city has. You know, if we could just have a little more explanation of why we're facing such an increase next year and thereafter. Okay, we're carrying on with it.
Through the chair, in previous years, the contract that was negotiated, Humane Society was not able to, it was not adequate funding for them to continue performing the services. Therefore, if we would like to continue to maintain the current level of services we have with them, this is what's being proposed as the cost that is required to continue moving forward with them.
Okay, I think that because my memory is a little vague from when we had discussed it. So, okay, it has been a question that this is a service that we have to provide to our citizens, and that we really underfunded it in the past, and now we want to carry on, and we have a good service provider. In the past, for many times, we've tried to get a new service provider. It's impossible, almost impossible to do. So, we have to step up to the plate and bite the bullet. Okay, and that's the answer. I just wanted to clarify that. I didn't get that as I read the report. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Yaneski.
Almost exactly the same two questions I had on that, but just to follow up on page 2.6, I was just trying to understand the addition and the subtraction there. Somehow it just didn't add up or didn't subtract right, and I now got your answer, so I appreciate where you're coming from, that the 295 is the deficit from the 913, right?
Correct.
Okay. The other question was in regards to the population thing again. It's the previous report talks about a current population of 251,000 and change, and here we're at 233, and you indicated that you're using the census from 2011 or 2016.
I believe it was 2016.
And that's fine, regardless of which one you're using. I just thought that, unless you just looked it up, after maybe consultation with planning staff could give you the latest up-to-date information like they had in the previous report. And so are you still going to use the figure of 233,000? Or would you rely on a more accurate or up-to-date figure that planning has just had in the last report of 251,000? Actually gives you more money.
Ms. Scheer, you going to answer that?
When we started this, we went back, we asked Jeanette McDonald, I believe she's in economic development, for the most recent census data, and that was the number that we were given, and it's the number we've worked with. To go up, to increase that population number based on the calculation we have now would be a significant increase in the contract value. What we did build into the proposed contract, though, is that when the next census data comes out, which I believe is anticipated in 2019, that we would do our best to put a more accurate number into the contract, and there would be a recalculation and increased costs at that time based on the actual population.
So you're going to rely, and you're going to, in the future, update the figures as you get the information. Is that what you're saying?
That is built into the contract, yes. When we have new census data, and in 2019, whether we do or not, we're going to increase the number based on our best estimates of the population.
Why would you not touch base with planning staff and work together?
I thought I had contacted the right person in economic development because we were looking for census data, and I don't believe planning staff has more up-to-date census data than economic development.
Well, then, does that mean that the information before the last report is not valuable?
I'm not saying that, I'm sorry.
You're saying you rely on the census data, and I'm not disagreeing it's good information, but if you get more up-to-date information from planning, why not use it?
If that's council's direction, I'm sure we could go back, but it will result in a significant increase to the city.
Yeah. Mr. Mayor, maybe Alain Picard has some comments on that.
Bernard, I'm sorry.
That's fine. Through you, Mr. Chair, I can confirm that the figure just recently given is in fact the 2016 census information, and that is the information source that they are using for this calculation. The population number that was given in the Growth Management Monitoring Report is a figure that we received from the region, and the region has been tasked by the province to actually assign population growth projections for the area municipalities. The methodology that the region uses is they use the census as a base, and then they derive an estimate annually of what has been the growth since the census took place.
Councillor Etherington.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'm satisfied with this report, and I certainly recognize the Humane Society does a great job. I just wanted to ask one basic question. I've asked it before, and that is, the Humane Society faces huge costs and huge workload because of cats. And I want to ask poor Gloria why we don't license cats and why we've never given attention to that.
Councillor Etherington, that's not part of what's being on the consent item.
Well, I think it is. It involves a great deal
Okay,
of money.
I'm going to rule that invalid. So you have another question?
And I just wanted to say it's coming back to council, so I'll be asking the same question there.
Okay. Councillor Davey.
Thank you. I don't question this. I think everything's been said. My only question is, I was a little surprised that there wasn't a bit more. I realize there isn't really a decision point for committee at this point except to do it or to not do it. But I noticed that it's not referred to budget. So at one point I was expecting there would be a discussion about this around budget time, but I'm assuming we approve it today. The only discussion we could potentially have around budget time would be the fundings. I know there's recommendations in the funding source, but would be the funding sources. Is that correct? Because it would be effectively approved at this point, well, once it goes past council.
Ms. McNeil?
Through the chair, I do believe that staff have looked at it for the budget coming up, and it will be considered as part of that.
Okay, so but once this gets ratified at council, then the question will no longer be whether we pay this or not. It will simply be how we pay for it.
That's correct.
Okay. And if I could, Mr. Chair, just a brief comment as someone,
sure,
consider myself a big supporter of the Humane Society and the welfare of and care of our animals. I know there isn't a ton of information here, but the reality is that we either go with the deal we have here, or we go with someone much more expensive, or we don't look after the animals in our community. So I'm happy to support this.
Okay. Are you continuing on other questions on this?
Because I asked, this is a 4-year contract we're approving, is that right? Yeah.
The initial term is in fact for 4 years. There is, as per council's last recommendation, the opportunity to have 2 4-year renewals, provided terms are agreed to at that time.
No, that's fine. So what we're approving right now is a 4-year contract.
That's correct.
Yeah, I just want to clarify. That's fine. I just want to make another comment too while I've got the floor. I asked a lot of questions there because I thought that there were interesting questions that the public really deserves to have discussed. Quite frankly, I think the cats issue should be discussed. I don't think there are reasons for doing, or we should throw it on the table. But I do want to take an opportunity to compliment both our staff and the Humane Society people, because this is, I've been around this horseshoe for many, many years, and this problem has bothered us for the last 25, 35, 40 years, and it's really a difficult thing to deal with. And I came away from the caucus meeting. I don't have any dogs, and I never had, I couldn't really truly understand the necessity of it, but I think coming out of that caucus meeting, that it's a service that we have to provide. And so I think this last round of negotiations, which have been going on for a long time, I think both sides have really worked hard to come out with something that I think will, it's a lot more money than we'd hoped or whatnot, but it's fair. It's a fair deal, and it'll be sort of planning for us on the road down the line. So thank you.
Councillor Marsh.
Thank you. I just want to add my 2 cents just regarding the population estimate that we use. I want to applaud staff for using census data. That's the most accurate data to be used. And the region's numbers may be slightly inflated for their own, for the purpose of growth projections, etc. But we need to rely on our census, and so I'm glad that that's the number we're using, and then it will be revisited when new census data comes out. I think that's the only appropriate way to go.
Councillor Etherington, are you questions?
Comment.
Comment? Okay, go ahead.
So I just wanted to make a quick comment, Mr. Chair, before you cut me off. Considering all of the needs in this community, I'm horrified at this total cost to take care of animals. And I'm not an animal hater. I think it's time we looked at this and brought it into some kind of balance.
Okay, thank you. There, I see no further comments. I'm just going to make my quick comments too as well, along with Councillor Davey. Either we go with this contract or we set up shop ourselves, and I don't think we want to go down that route. So I think this is the prudent way. The costs are what the costs are to have this service done in our community. Okay, on to item number 3. Anyone have questions for item number 3? Councillor Davey.
Thank you. I don't have many concerns with this. The only one that I want to discuss briefly, because to be frank, I'm largely ignorant, not sitting on the Heritage Committee. But on page 3-2, there's the addition for the heritage resources. So am I to understand this is to do with the story I read recently about potentially moving that 1800s structure?
Ms. Goldrick?
So through you, Chair, that's correct. The scope increase associated with heritage resources is related to the development of a conservation plan for the structure.
Okay, and so presumably within this scope increase, they would be looking at the costs of various ways of preserving that building?
So the conservation plan the conservation plan looks at whether to move it intact or to dismantle and rebuild. So that has been part of the conversation in terms of what the best way to move the heritage home is.
Okay, so in just deciding, and I, again, be clear, I'm not as informed as potentially other members of council on this, but supposing for the moment that committee decided they didn't want to preserve it, the cost was too high. My concern would be that we go through the process of assessing it and spending this $75,000, and we ultimately decide we don't want to keep it at all. So has there been the thought process put to that? Like perhaps it should come to council or committee before we do this additional scope increase to potentially save that $75,000. Am I making sense?
Yes, so through you, Chair, there has been work done in terms of the conservation plan to support the motion that went before Heritage Kitchener last week. There is potential marginal savings associated with some design work with the new location, and it should council make a decision to not move the heritage home, then there could be potential marginal savings there.
Okay, and I want to be careful, Mr. Chair. I don't want to have that discussion now. It's not the time for that. I just wanted. So I guess the simple question is there a way of deferring this portion of the consultant extension, pending the discussion if we want to, what we want to do with this building, to potentially save that $75,000?
So through you, Chair, certainly we could look at deferring this portion of the increase.
Ms. Fletcher?
Through the Chair, if I understand Councillor Davies correctly, you're concerned if we don't spend the money that there would be a savings. I think for the purpose of today, we're just looking at an extension of the PO. If monies aren't spent, they would stay with the bottom line of the project.
Okay, so I'm fine with that, but then I guess my only concern there then is how can I be assured that we wouldn't spend this money prior to making that decision on what we want to do with the building? Didn't follow my line of thinking. And you know what, and assuming this is a consent item, I think I'll just leave it at that, and I'm happy to approve it, but between now and council, if I can get further clarity on that, I would appreciate it. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gazzola?
I have a number of concerns with this project. The project's 40%. This part of the project is 40% over budget. When do we step back when we're way over budget like that? When do we step back and say we need to take a second look, we need to do different things? Like, I'm amazed at these items that are here. I mean, we knew we had a heritage property there. That's one item. We knew this environmental considerations, those are, you can't wake up in the morning anymore without having to concern environmental considerations. You know, and yet we let a contract go, and now we're 40% short. So when do we, if I could ask, this phase 1, 2, or 3 totals about $16 million. What's that whole South Kitchener District project? What is the cost of all of that?
Ms. Goldrick?
So through you, Chair, as Councillor Gazzola mentioned, the project is divided into phases. So phase 1 is budgeted at $10.3 million. What I can assure Councillor Gazzola is that we have gone through a detailed design costing phase of the phase 1 elements, including the scope increase associated with the consulting fees and appropriate contingencies as well. And we are targeted to be on budget at the $10.3 million. Phase 2 is currently budgeted at $5.5 million. In 2021 to 2022, and phase 3 is budgeted at $3.2 million in 2025.
So you're telling me that even though this part of the phase 1 is over by 40%, the whole thing is going to be under, and it's going to work out. How? I don't mean to be, but how can how can I trust you? I mean,
Ms. Fletcher?
Through the chair, maybe Ms. McGoldrick can explain, because I had a similar question to how we're funding this consultant extension. And my understanding is, at the time of scoping the project, we would put in a budget for a consultant line. Because some of these archaeological, environmental, and heritage aspects are iterative, so phase 1 has to happen before we know what phase 2 will include, we put the additional monies for potential consulting fees into a contingency line. So what we're doing is coming to council to say we need to spend more of that contingency line. The PO extension or increase is beyond what staff can do within their area of authority, so we need to come before council. The money has always been in the budget. It just was not specifically allocated to the consultant line. And I'll turn to Ms. McGoldrick to correct any of that if I misunderstood.
No, that's correct. It's incorporated as part of the overall budget cost.
So how, in the $16 million, how big of a contingency do you have in there?
I don't have the contingency dollar in front of me. It would typically be in the 10 to 15% range. But I can certainly confirm that before September 25th.
Okay, the other question I had really is, this is just part of that whole project. What's the total project cost? What's the whole big picture cost? Right where? It's not there. That's just the tip of the iceberg. What's the total project? I mean, the public knowledge. That's the secret. But my concern is the big picture is a big figure, and if we run into 40% problems with the big picture, where are we? So what is the big picture?
So through you, Chair, in terms of the phase 1, which is the project before us today, the big picture dollar amount is $10.3 million, in which we are managing and scoping within the $10.3 million.
I'm talking about the whole South Kitchener District project. Is it not a $75 to $80 million project?
I can go back to the master plan. I think Councillor Galloway-Sealock is correct. I do believe
I think if my memory serves, ballpark is $60 million.
You know, my memory remembers $74 million because and to my mind, it was very close to the cost of this new city hall. But you know, be it as it may, I'm just concerned when we're talking those kind of dollars.
Councillor Gazzola, do you have any other further questions? Because your time is up.
I will keep quiet. Thank you.
Okay.
I've said my piece.
Councillor Galloway-Seelock.
So I just want to be clear, with what Councillor Davey asked, there is the potential for some savings within this extension if decisions are made on the 25th with regards to the Heritage Home, that there could be some savings with regards to this extension.
That's correct.
Okay. And it's clear to me that we aren't spending any more money on this project than is already allotted. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Having had the opportunity to meet with you, it's my understanding that some of the consulting work that we'll be doing on this phase is actually related to phase 2 and 3, so some of those costs may not come up in phase 2 and 3.
That's correct.
Okay. And some of the environmental costs with regards to the considerations for environment weren't necessarily things that we were anticipating, but there may also be some savings in that line as well if we don't need to take it to its full capacity with all stages of the environmental assessment or the environmental site assessment.
Through Chair, that's also correct.
Okay, so we are basically approving a max budget that you might have to do for the purchase order extension, but at the end of the day, we're not spending any more money, and if there is any savings within this extension of contract, that it just goes back to the overall project, and we may need it elsewhere. It kind of goes back to that contingency line, and the project continues to move forward. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Singh.
Yeah, just to get a more broad understanding, and I think this is, I get it, part of it, more for understanding for our public as well, so they realize where the budgeting of this staggering number will come from as well. So aside from the operations once the park is constructed, the monies that are budgeted in various different phases comes from development charges, correct?
Right. I don't have the exact split. I believe the majority does come out of development charges. There may be a small portion out of capital, out of current.
And the development charges primarily comes from the increase in growth and new development that takes place in the city.
That's correct.
Good. Just wanted to make clear that this is not necessarily coming from our tax base. It's primarily based on the growth that's taking place in our city. The last little bit I want to say, and no fault to Councillor Gazzola, I don't think you meant it as such, but I think we want to make sure, that's the optics of it. We have complete faith and trust in our staff. It's not that we don't trust you. I think we do, we should be, and I agree with you, Councillor Gazzola. Critical, especially when we're looking at a project the size of this, critical at every phase, but we do have complete trust and faith in our staff and the answers that they give us. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. On to item number 4. Do we have any more questions? Councillor Schneider.
Not a question, Chair Ioannidis, but just thanks to our transportation staff. I had residents contact me about this issue, and staff did an incredible job engaging and speaking to the residents and gathering information that made this decision what it is. So I wanted to thank staff for their excellent work.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Yaneski.
Yeah, in regard to the report, I noticed that on page 4-2, there's no statistics as similar to the next report on page 5-2, showing the breakdown of the voting and the requirements for the calculations and the responses from the neighborhood. Just wondering why not.
Mr. Carmichael.
Yes, through you, Chair. Response to that question simply is the Old Chicopee Drive report that you're posing the question about. Staff felt was a safety concern, and we felt it was more important to proceed with a recommendation than to survey the residents about what should be put in there. And as far as the other report goes, excuse me, that one wasn't identified so much as a safety concern. We felt it was left up to the residents was appropriate. And that's common practice we do on a regular basis.
Councillor Gazzola.
Yeah, I was also interested in that same issue as to why the neighborhood wasn't canvassed, and I can appreciate that. The other, I just have a general question. You have several reports here today, and I'm always amazed at the poor participation overall. Like you never see, you often see 30 to 40 or 40% or 45. But you never see 70-75% participation. And I thought public engagement was one of the issues that we're working on all the time. Is there any reason that you can understand as to why we don't get better participation on those queries? Because there are a lot of them deal with traffic and issues with your department.
Through the chair, I can only speak to my experience in 30 years working in the division and advise that the percentage responses we get do vary by report, but the 30 to 40% response rate you refer to is common. It's not unusual, and quite frankly, it's become an expectation. It's just a matter of we can engage the residents, but we can't force them to provide input. And just in general conversations with the public, we find it common that if someone thinks that the suggestion is good, they just won't respond, and we just won't get input on it. So these numbers are not at all unusual. It's what we've been working with for years, and at the same time, when we do these surveys, we do advise the residents that if you do not respond, you will be subject to staff recommendation will be subject to those that did respond.
Thank you.
Okay, we have no further questions on item number 4. Item number 5, consent item 5. Going once, going twice. Consent item number 6. Councillor Gazzola.
Just a quick question. If you're coming out of Corfield Drive, does that look like this new street? Does that look like an extension of Corfield Drive, or does it look as a separate street? I'm just wondering if you're coming down Corfield, all of a sudden the name changes.
Mr. Pennell?
Through you, Mr. Chair. The extension, the Chicopee Hills Drive, as it's been proposed, will look different than an extension of Corfield Drive. The cross-section is different. There is different lighting on that street than on a public street as well. The width of the street is different, and there is a multi-use pathway that will also differentiate it from a public street.
Okay, so then that takes the confusion away from the motorist or whatever. Thank you.
Do we have any questions on item number 7? Councillor Yarneski.
Yes, maybe just a couple of questions on this particular procedure to authorize execution of agreements of higher densities and increases in bonusing. Each time there's a requirement that we do right now, does that matter come before council? If there's a request from a developer or through discussions with staff?
Mr. Bernard?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, it does become before council if it is a development approval that requires council approval. It would not come before council, or we would have to do a separate request to council strictly to authorize the agreement if it was a form of development that did not require a council approval, such as a site plan approval, which is the example given in the report.
So in site plan approvals, those matters do not come unless there was something dire important. So in this particular recommendation, help me understand what additional things need to be done that we're not doing right now that's not coming before council, that the staff is doing. I'm missing something here.
Sure. So through you, Mr. Chair, what the bylaw does is authorize the mayor and clerk to actually sign an agreement that secures the benefits. The bylaw that we're proposing in no way predetermines what the details are of those benefits. Those are determined as part of the planning approval. What it does do is it creates an efficiency where we don't have to ask for that authorization for an agreement, which is to the benefit of the city. It's separate. We have to remember to include it as one of the recommendations if it's a type of application that requires council approval. And we would actually have to write a separate report in cases where that is not the case.
I don't know where to go to from here. My concern sort of comes down to is if this is all delegated to staff, is that the whole objective in terms of dealing with these matters and entering into the agreement that the mayor will sign?
Through you, Mr. Chair, no, not necessarily. The bylaw is strictly to authorize the agreement. What actually goes into the agreement, that's a decision that's made before that time. It's actually made as part of the approval process of the development project in question.
Okay, I understand that answer. So my next question then would be, if there's a development that is taking place, staff have been working on with the development industry, and there's a requirement to increase in height and density to provide certain amenities, daycare, whatever, and there's a concern by the neighborhood of this potential increase in height and the density. Will that matter come before council?
Through you, Mr. Chair, only if they require an amendment to our official plan or our zoning bylaw to get there. If it's something that they're already permitted as of right, it is something that they can obtain and secure with a site plan approval. The purpose of the agreement is, and it's not a mandatory thing, it's a practice that the city has because it's a good practice, is to make sure that we're securing them in favor of the city and we're tying them down to the development.
Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Gazzola.
Yeah, just a quick legal question. At one time, I thought that under the municipal act there, bonusing was not allowed. But I guess that's a different type, am I correct? That's a different type of bonusing than what we're talking about here. Here, we're talking about allowing certain things. We're not paying any dollars out, whereas the other way, the other bonusing, it could be the case. Is that right? Am I?
I can answer that,
okay.
if that's okay. So this is a provision in the Planning Act that actually explicitly, specifically does allow it, and this provision does not conflict in any way with the Municipal Act provisions that prohibit bonusing to private enterprises.
Okay, they're two different things.
They are.
Yeah, okay, that's all. Thank you.
Okay, we have no further questions on item 7. The last item, consent item, number 8. Do we have any questions? Oh. Councillor Yaneski?
Yeah, in regard to this particular event, I know it's not in my ward, but again, you have a fundraising thing, which is, I think, is a good cause. Of course, it'd be food trucks and some entertainment. I'm just wondering again with the noise issue, noise being music, and is there any limits you're putting in terms of decibel readings, or are you just going to let it be wide open because it's right in the heart of the city?
Ms. McNeil?
Through the chair, my understanding is the music for this is going to be quite limited. It's going to be more buskers and some speeches that are happening with some people playing some acoustic instruments throughout the dinner. So I wouldn't expect that this would be any louder than any event that's taken place in Victoria Park throughout the summer as part of our special events.
Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Gazzola?
No more questions. I would like to ask that items 2 and 3 be dealt with separately and that there be a recorded vote on each of them.
Okay, so it's been moved by Councillor Arlington, so we're going to move on items 1, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried unanimously. As far as recorded vote, item number 2. That's carried unanimously. Now for consent item number 3, voting's open. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Okay, so that concludes the consent items. I think we broke a record there. We'll move on to discussion items item number 9, dealing with the appeal adult entertainment parlor on 2399 Kingsway Drive. We don't have a presentation from staff, is my understanding, but we do have a delegation, Mr. Ed Reber from Love Shop. And just to give you a quick reminder, Mr. Reber, pursuant to Council's procedural bylaw, delegations are permitted to address the committee for a maximum of 5 minutes. Welcome. I'll set you up here. Welcome.
Yep, welcome. I think, I've been in the adult retail business for almost 16 years, and over those 16 years, you really see the change of how things have evolved. Before, there used to be the old seedy porn store where you could go in, rent a movie, go into a room, watch the movie, drop it off, leave. Now we're more of an upscale store. You walk in, you shop, just like any other retail store, Walmart, whatever. You're just buying adult goods. You pay for them, you go home. There is no entertainment like you would at a strip club or a massage parlor or whatever. The place that's in question now that's holding us back from opening a store at this location is a massage parlor that's, I don't even know how far it was, within the 400 meters, and it's in a house. It's probably 100 square feet. We're looking at roughly taking 7,000 to 10,000 square foot space for a store. That's a lot of difference in tax dollars. It's a lot of different in a lot of things for the city. The store in question now, it's been vacant now for quite a while. I'm a resident of Kitchener, so I kind of know the area and where it is and everything. Everyone's talking about minimum wage, that, people are going to lay off, they're going to have shorter hours. Here we are with an owner that's looking at opening a business, another business within our city, because we already have one store now at Duke and Victoria. We have one in Cambridge, which is still Waterloo region, but a different city. Both are doing very well, if not better than what the economy is. It's just unfortunate that property was within a 400-meter radius, which I don't classify us as an entertainment parlor. That bylaw is old when you think about what adult stores used to be. It's more just a basic retail store. We have a lot of customers that come in just for medical reasons. You go to a doctor after having a prostate operation or whatever, they're told to go to an adult store to buy a pump or some kind of aid that can help them with their problems and stuff like that. So you can't go to Walmart to buy something like that. You have to go to an adult store. It's a big difference between the old days to nowadays.
Okay, thank you. We do have some questions for you.
Yep.
Councillor Davey.
Thank you for coming in for your presentation. I appreciate it. I'm going to ask the question of staff, so I thought I'd ask you first. Has the establishments in Kitchener, have you ever had any issues with the City of Kitchener at all that you'd like to speak to?
No.
No, very good. And is it, you said there's another one here in Kitchener and there's one in Cambridge. Is that, those the only ones in existence?
No, we have one in Waterloo.
Okay.
A little tiny one. It's like 1,200 square feet. The one in Kitchener is maybe 6,000 square feet. The one that I look after in Cambridge is 10,000 square feet. And they all do quite well. You know, with the changing of society, people don't go out drinking anymore. They stay at home. And what not better else to do is stay at home.
Okay. And the only other thing I wanted to point out is that even if a committee were to approve this use, you do understand that there would be significant costs associated proceeding with the zone change application, like in the thousands of dollars. You understand that's part of the process?
Yes, we've been through this before in other cities. The owner of the Love Shop, we have, I think, 19 stores, and it's one owner. We've been through this, I think, in Hamilton and Toronto, so we know exactly what the costs are involved.
Okay, thank you kindly.
Councillor Gazzola.
Yeah, actually, I have questions of staff, but just, so are you the owner or the franchisee?
No, I used to be the general manager for the company. I stepped down from that position a couple years ago, and I just look after a store now in Kitchener. I have 4 small kids, so I prefer not to be on the road that much.
Okay, so you realize that, yeah, that if we do approve it, you either have to, what is it, there's either a minor variance involved or a zone change?
Yeah, I've spoken, it would be a minor variance to the bylaw.
Yeah.
And there is a zoning change being done. I talked to the property manager of the building, and he said there's being a zoning change from a C6 to a common 2 sometime in January to March, sometime in that time frame.
Well, I'll go up, follow that up with staff. So in other words, if that zone change goes through, you don't have to concern yourself about that. You'd only have to concern about the minor variance.
Yeah.
Do you have ideas of what the costs of either one of those are? Or?
To open another store?
No, for you to have to appeal them.
The cost of variance?
Yeah.
The last time I did one was in Toronto. It was almost $10,000.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Thanks.
Councillor Marsh.
Thank you. Thank you for coming in. I just have a couple questions for you. The first is just, what investment, if any, has the Love Shop already made in this location?
As far as I know, nothing.
Okay. And there aren't that many other adult entertainment establishments throughout the city. Why would the Love Shop choose to come to this particular location, which is going to be a challenge, rather than go to a different location where you don't have this problem?
The present one we rent right now, the owners of that building, we think, are also looking at possibly turning that one into more of a business oriented building. So we're planning for the future that maybe they won't renew our lease come that time, because they are turning it in, because it's just at Duke and Victoria, which is more of a business building. There's a property management, that's who owns it. Mm-hmm. They're turning that into
That's fine. I'm just asking about why not a different location.
We're looking at providing for customers. So most buildings that you find are small. We want something that's going to provide for everybody, and we find, in order to do that, you have to go a larger store. Mm-hmm. And this is a store that's in the right area for us. There's no schools nearby. There's nothing that would take away from like having an Apple store there.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
Just questions, staff? Okay. Thanks, Mr. Eber. That's all we have for you today. Okay, Councillor Davey.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up on that same question, if I could. Has there ever been any issues with the existing location in Kitchener that we're aware of?
Go ahead.
Through the chair, we've had no issues with that location.
Okay. Next question is, like I understand there'll be a variance. Is there any danger in terms of setting some sort of precedent going forward if we were to approve this?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
Yeah, I'm just wondering if there's any danger in setting any sort of precedent going forward.
Through the chair, there could be. I have been contacted by other adult entertainment parlor license holders about changing locations, and I've had to advise them that it would be denied based on the location separation.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Gazzola.
Yeah, in coming up with this distance, did the other owner, did they complain, or is that coming from staff because you know that it just isn't the 400 meters or feet or whatever it is? So did the other organization complain?
Through the chair?
Yeah.
There was no complaint that came through. This was a proposed location that the owner contacted me about and asked if it was a possibility to open their store there.
Yeah. Thanks. If this is denied, does the applicant have any opportunity to appeal a decision of council?
The applicant would have to apply for judicial review.
So there is an avenue at least open for them.
Sorry?
There is an avenue of appeal.
There is.
Yeah. If we take option B here, we're really taking it out of council's hands, right? It goes, the Committee of Adjustment would then make the decision, right? And we have no bearing on that Committee of Adjustment decision?
If you were to, sorry. Are you saying that if you were to approve the exemption from the licensing bylaw, is that the end of your role?
Yeah, I'm saying if we approve it, they still have to deal with that variance.
Yeah, so it still could be denied on the planning side through zoning, but your role would be complete.
Yeah, I wasn't going to go to the zoning one yet. For the variance portion of it would go to the Committee of Adjustment. They make a decision. Council has no jurisdiction over that decision.
That's correct.
Yeah, okay. Now doing the zoning part of it, the applicant said that we are in the process of changing that zoning, and thereby it would no longer that would no longer stand as a reason for us to not allow it. Is that right? Is the zoning being changed? Or?
I don't know where they're at in that process. I believe Helen can answer that. But what I want you to understand is there's two separate things that are preventing them from locating there right now. And one is the zoning and one is the licensing bylaw. So they're really only asking the question about the licensing bylaw of you today.
No, and I appreciate that, but what about the zoning? What about if 6 months from now the zoning is changed and this applicant comes through, then there's only one issue, right?
That would be correct. Then and I'll let Helen speak to where they're at with the zoning.
Through the chair, in speaking with zoning, they advised me that this is a proposed change under their comprehensive zoning review, but under the current legislation, they can't approve this location because it has not yet been approved by council.
Okay, I appreciate that. So the zoning change isn't there, but and so we have to act as if it is there. So okay, thank you. That answers all my questions.
Councillor Yaneski.
I had similar questions. They've been answered, but one final question, that was the first question. If this did meet the distance separation and was in an area that was zoned properly, would this application be here before us, or would it just be done by staff?
Through you, Chair, if the zoning was not an issue, this would still be denied based on the location separation and would still be open for appeal.
But my question is, if it did meet the zoning and did meet the separation, distance separation, would it be before us here?
It would be. Zoning is a requirement of issuing the license.
I understand that, but that's not the... If the zoning was okay, and it conformed, and the distance was okay, would this be done by staff only, or would the application still have to come here?
Yes, staff would approve that if they met both conditions.
Staff would approve it?
Yes.
And we wouldn't deal with it?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Councillor Davey.
Oh, not a question.
We have no further questions, so you...
Oh, okay. I would defer to the ward councillor who wants to move it, but I'm hoping that he would move approval, but then I have comment as well.
Councillor Gazzola.
Yeah, as the ward councillor, I would insert the option B, that it be approved.
Okay. Councillor Davey.
Yeah, thank you. I'll just comment briefly. I certainly agree with the delegation's approach. There's been no issues with the City of Kitchener, and seems like they're just planning for a potential change of use at their existing location. So yeah, I think this is entirely appropriate, and in a more general sense, I tend to... I've never been a big fan of government imposing any sort of morality in these sorts of situations. So, yeah, I think this is something that probably wouldn't have come to us except for it just sort of tripped a safety, and I'm content to approve it.
Yeah, there's no other further comments. I agree with you. We've never had an issue with this resident and the ownership of the Love Shop, and again, they find a suitable location, and the two businesses are completely different in my mind, and I don't really have a concern, and I'm glad that this has been moved forward to approve. So with that, all those in favor? Opposed? That's been carried unanimously. Okay, thank you. That concludes this item. Item number 10, dealing with the Dune Mills traffic calming review. Moved by Councillor Unesky. We have any questions? All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Item number 11, work permit bylaw. Councillor Singh.
Yes, thank you. I do have a question in the direction that we're heading with this. What brought about this recommendation?
Mr. Carmichael.
Yeah, excuse me. Through the chair, simply staff regularly meet with contractors, consultants in the industry, as well as our partners within the region of Waterloo, Cambridge and City of Waterloo, as well as Guelph. And it's come to our attention that fees have started to be charged for work permits in our area, specifically Cambridge, Waterloo, and Guelph. And we're recommending to fall in line with that, to basically insert a fee for our contractors to pay for work permits. And what that will do is allow for the cost to be recovered of the cost of our staff to administer these permits to be recovered from the companies that are actually doing the work. Point there being is we don't feel that the general tax base should be covering the costs of private development work, and this will accurately reflect that those private developments pay all costs for their associated permits and fees.
Yeah, and I appreciate that, and I think rightly so. They have the way of adjusting those costs within their projects. But a lot of the work that we do on the roadways is work that the City of Kitchener is conducting as well, and works that are contracted to outside contractors to do, in which case, guess what? They're going to charge that taxpayer, and perhaps not necessarily at the $200 fee, but they may feel that there's administrative cost to apply for that permit, and for their internal costs, it's actually $300. So the taxpayer gets kind of hosed in a different way. Can you speak to that concern?
Through the chair, we are proposing that all work associated with the City of Kitchener and utility companies are exempt from paying the work permit fee, and the fees themselves, for the vast majority, will be covered by private companies.
Now, the work with the region, I'm assuming that's still going to be charged? The work that's being done by the region, on regional roads?
In our discussions through processing, or I should say preparing this permit bylaw, the region as well would be exempt from paying the work permit fees.
Any reason why?
They're a public entity similar to the City of Kitchener.
Okay. Essentially because the taxpayer in the end would pay for that fee. Okay.
Indirectly. Yeah.
All right, that was my primary concern, so that's great.
Councillor Galloway-Sealock.
So while reading this, I was just struggling with understanding exactly what type of work would be completed. So can you just give me some examples of where this would be utilized?
Through the chair, work permits are required for any company doing work within any of our city's rights of way. So it falls in line with issuing the work permits for all of those works. Where we would be recovering fees would be generally from the private companies, whether it be developers building new homes, new subdivisions, whether it be contractors that are required to do window repairs to businesses that will impact the right-of-way. A number of work permits are related specific to private development but require work within the right-of-way, and that's where we'd be recovering fees in a general sense for that type of work.
Can you go over what you said about new construction? Like you said at the beginning, one of the examples was new subdivisions.
Through the chair, maybe more specifically, way to describe that would be infill of vacant properties. We refer to them as off-site works, where a developer will come in and develop a vacant parcel of land. Through the developing that land, they'll be required to service it, which means they'll get out in the right-of-way and connect to our sewers and water mains and things like that, and that's where the fees would come into effect.
Okay, and in reading this report, this is purely based on work that needs to be done on the road, and it would have no effect on anybody, like from a citizen's perspective, if they were just closing the roadway for like a party or a barbecue or something like that.
Through the chair, yeah, it will not impact those social events you refer to.
So it's really about closing the road for any work that needs to be done within the right-of-way.
That's correct.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that was clear. Thank you.
Councillor Gazzola.
Yeah, I'm not sure I clearly understand where we're going here. If we have a company that comes in, wins an award for a tender, comes in and puts sewers in, are we going to charge that company for that?
Through the chair, no. If they're doing work on behalf of the City of Kitchener, they would be exempt from that fee.
Okay, so this schedule you show, it relates to all of these companies that are not exempt. So in other words, if it were in place, we would have earned $165,000 from them.
Through the chair, that's correct, based on 2016 numbers.
And it has those figures have nothing to do with the LRT because that's exempt.
That's correct.
So what have we done in the past? Well, what have we? Are you saying that the cost we've spent $80,000 to do this, and the taxpayer's been paying the $80,000. Now we're going to collect $165,000 from these affected companies.
Through the chair, I think the best way to answer that would be that up until this proposed process and in current situation, that the administration of these permits is done by existing staff and is covered by the existing staff's wages. but there's not a separate fee for doing so, and that's what we're proposing.
No, but we have incurred, and the taxpayer has incurred $80,000 in admin fees by our current staff, and we haven't gotten a cent for it, and now we're going to get $165,000.
Through the chair, I would suggest that we haven't been missing out on fees because we have not been charging fees. It would be just a general requirement of that position within our office to execute the permits for these developers and contractors.
You're saying we're not out because we didn't charge them. We could have charged them from what you're recommending here.
Through the chair, if we had approached council to get approval for this type of user fee schedule in the past, then yes, we could have charged them, but under current situation, we do not have that in place.
Okay, tell me why are places like Hydro, was it Hydro Gas and Telephone, why are they exempt? And I really carry the question even one step further to the region, because I know it's all one taxpayer, but if, we're a lot of partners in the region. So.
Hydro has a blanket exemption under its legislation. We're not able to charge fees. Bell and Rogers, under the telecommunications legislation, have a different process to follow. So we cannot unilaterally impose requirements on them. They go through a municipal consent process. We can have an agreement in place which can include reasonable costs, but it's outside of the bylaw process. If we're not able to come to an agreement with those telecommunications carriers, they have an appeal process to the CRTC that can decide what the reasonable costs will be. With respect to the region, I'd imagine, do we also do things on regional roads? Is there some reciprocity involved?
Well, so are we collecting from telephone and that now?
Currently, we don't charge permit fees right now.
Could we be?
Go ahead. I understand that with one of the carriers, we do have a municipal consent agreement in place that does set out some fees as have been agreed. I don't have all of the details in front of me. Others, again, they need consent to do the work, and fees can be a negotiation leading to that happening.
But Hydro's free.
Yes, although I understand that they're cooperative because of our relationship.
Okay. I'm not sure where we're going on this, because it's hard to understand who really this is impacting. So,
Councillor Marsh.
Thank you. I just want to find out about the mobile crane fee. Will this fee apply to projects only taking place in the right-of-way?
Through the chair, that's correct. Our work permit bylaw is limited to regulating the right-of-way only.
Okay, and so when work is being done where there's a mobile crane, will that always require closure or partial closure? So we'd have a fee regardless for the closure as well as for a mobile crane. Is that correct?
Through the chair, that's correct. There's significant impact typically realized when a mobile crane operation is placed on a development. And in talking with the other municipalities, our recommendation is consistent with those. Basically, it's a reflection of the significant impact that a crane will have on a right-of-way. And yes, there will be the actual work permit fee applied as well as the crane fee.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Davey.
Sorry, I stepped out for just a minute, so apologies if this was asked, but I just wanted to clarify on page 11-2, the survey of area municipalities. In terms of what we're looking at implementing, how is that different? Like exactly how is it different in terms of the cost, for example, to the people we would be applying this to in the cities mentioned?
Through the chair, I'm Could you further clarify that question?
I guess
Sorry.
my question is, it makes it, when I read this, it sounds like Cambridge, Waterloo, and Guelph already have this sort of implemented.
Already have
and already have this implemented,
Correct.
and we don't. So we're the outlier in this area. Okay.
Yes, and we're trying to...
Okay, and in terms of the costs and the fees, we're in line with them?
Correct.
Okay.
Very much so.
And the only other question, I have to ask, is I noticed that part of the additional revenue, about half of it, would be for a temporary traffic project coordinator. I believe this is all contingent on the budget process. Have we looked into that? Has staff looked into that internally in terms of ability to fill that position within existing headcounts, or is that an absolute, we've already looked at that and we can't do it within existing headcounts or even partially?
Through the chair, it's a very excellent question. We currently do have a temporary second traffic project coordinator in place that has been approved based on the additional demands of the LRT and the new Highway 7. Having said that, this report's recommendation to extend that second temporary traffic project coordinator is a reflection of a number of things. It's first and foremost, and probably most importantly, is the significant increase in workload that this position has experienced over the last 10 to 15 years. The amount of overtime put in by that position has increased significantly. It's just sheer demands have increased due to increased development. We have increased infrastructure funding that has resulted in further infrastructure projects, which puts more pressure on this job. And it's just basically general demand. So what we're proposing is that the second traffic project coordinator be temporary for 2018, that it be piloted through that year, and that we report back for the 2019 budget process with the potential to recommend that position be made permanent.
Mr. Reedman?
Through the chair, and just to further answer, so we have looked at all the roles within transportation services to see if there's any ability to reorganize work, and each function in that area is maximized. It is a very small team with a lot of different priorities that council's seeking implementation of.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I'm going to make my question since the others have already been questioned once. Part of the reason why we're looking at this is because of all the amount of construction and everything else that's taken place in the region, correct?
Through the chair, that's one aspect of it, yes.
Have we looked at providing, since the region is responsible for creating a lot of the traffic concerns and closures, have we looked at charging the region for these fees and recovering those fees?
Through the chair, are you specifically asking charging a fee to the region for any work permit that we issued for them?
Yes, because realistically, we're creating this because they created a lot of traffic issues and concerns, and now we're gonna hit the private sector on this.
If I may, Chair, the majority of the permits that were issued for LRT were all regional permits because the majority of the work was on regional roads, not city roads. The permits that were issued for utilities that were for the work related to LRT that were on city roads, they would have been exempt from those permit fees because they were the utilities that were doing that work.
Okay. Councillor Singh, thank you.
Yeah, I'll carry forward because I don't know if we got the answer that you were looking for, Mr. Chair. I think the question was, it seems to be a problem created because of LRT, because of the backlog work. And that's the agency that is now being exempt through this. And because of that backlog work, the additional stresses on our staff, now we are applying a fee that's going to impact the private industry. So is that aspect of fairness there? I think that's where the question was coming from. So,
Mr. Reedman?
Through the chair, if I can direct your attention to page 11-4, you'll note that there were 837 work permits issued in the City of Kitchener, and 637 of those would be for billable work as per the proposed schedule. So the vast majority of these are private work that's happening on our roadways that we're looking to recover the fees and fall in line with other municipalities. Sort of reconfirming what Ms. Brasura said, most of the regional work permits happen on their roads. We do have some closures on their roads that we require for our work. So if we were to charge the region, they would likely just come back and charge us, and it would come out in the wash in the end, because we do have intersections that join local and regional roads.
So how are we doing this right now? So we do have a traffic coordinator I know we don't charge for it, so we have been doing this. So where does that extra need for additional FTE come in? Be it temporary, be it a trial project that would come back later. We're doing this, we're accommodating, again, the additional stresses because of the LRT projects. That's slowly going to be on the decline as the project is coming to fulfillment. Why the need for it? We're going ahead with a fee where we're adding additional FTE, be it temporary or part-time right now. That's my concern a little bit, if you can focus on that.
Stephanie beside me might have further to add, but it's not purely, this recommendation is not purely recognition of the increased work from the development of the LRT. It's other projects in the area, the new Highway 7, which is going to extend for a number of further years. It's a general increase in demand for work permits around the city that has been noted by our staff. And the infrastructure funding that I referred to as well is going to increase our work for the next number of years.
And that's where my challenge would be, and that's fine, I accept that. My only concern is I would have loved to have seen this and said, you know what, guys, we're not charging anything. Now all of a sudden we're going to start charging it. We had billable hours to the private industry of $63,000, and that's extra net revenue back to the tax base. I'd be ecstatic. But what I'm hearing is we have $63,000 billable, but now we're going to end up adding a cost of maybe upwards to $80,000, where we're going to end up even negative. What I'm saying is we've been managing with the additional workload because of the LRT projects. That's going to be in a decline. I hear you, there will be other projects as well, like the Highway 7. But point is, we've been managing, I don't see why there's an increase of the $80,000 or the anticipation for that temporary FTE.
Through the chair, we have had a second temporary traffic project coordinator in place for the past 2 years, reflecting the increase in demands. And yes, it's related to the LRT and the new Highway 7, but it's also general demand as well. And I can only speak to the impact on our existing permanent traffic project coordinator and the hours that person has put in, including extensive overtime hours, and this has been going on long before the LRT and the new Highway 7 projects came on board. So, quite frankly, we probably could have been in front of you folks 5 years ago making the same request, but we're doing so now based on a plan to implement user fees that will cover the cost of that extra staff.
My question isn't about the fee. I'm in agreement with the fee. I hear you with the demand. My question is the direction of a temporary, a new hire, increase of capacity. I'm saying it seems as if we had been managing within current capacity. Why that need? I would have just loved to see this extra revenue coming into our tax base. That's my only question a little bit, but I'll leave that on my determination if I will support or not.
Through the chair, I'll respond to advise that we are recommending that this be a pilot project for 2018, and it can be reviewed again after that pilot year.
Mr. Reedman?
Through the chair, if I could just add to that a little bit. When I first arrived at the City of Kitchener about 4 years ago, Ms. Brasseur role was extremely overworked. She was submitting a lot of overtime just to keep up with the amount of projects that were being submitted. When the LRT happened, a corporate decision was to add a pilot project with Highway 7. That work's wrapping up shortly. In the last 2 or 3 years, the off-site work permits or on-road work permits have increased about 300%. So there's been significant work in this area, and it would be hard to justify maintaining one staff. The reason why we're proposing to pitch it as a pilot is the LRT work is ramping down. So it's to confirm that that volume of work is still moving forward before we go on with a full commitment for an FTE.
Councillor Gazzola? Oh, sorry, go ahead, Councillor Gazzola. Sorry, Councillor Marsh.
Yeah, I had a number of other questions, and it all hinges around this hiring this additional staff or carrying on with this staff. I guess my question right now is, this really is totally a 2018 budget issue. We should not be, I hope we're not approving a new bylaw now, because there are too many questions, as far as I'm concerned, that relate to what are we going to do in 2018. I don't have a problem in the direction that we're going, and I really wonder why we haven't gone to it before. But I do have a problem with adding this additional staff. We added this additional staff for the LRT work, and that's over with. I'd like a lot more detail as to why all of a sudden now we need more staff. Where are we short? What's happened? And but it all ties into next year's budget. So I don't know what decision we're making today. If it's a decision to refer all of this to the budget, then that's fine. I can support that. But if we're making any other decisions, I can't support them.
Mr. Reedman?
Through the chair, we can provide additional information as part of the budget process. I think one thing not to lose sight on is the bylaw amendment. One part of it is the fee schedule, but also refreshing the bylaw so that it's generally in line with the other municipalities. So whether or not council chooses to adopt a fee or not associated with that as part of the budget process is council's choice, but a lot of the language in the bylaw is to bring us in compliance with the other municipalities. The other component is we are looking at it as a pilot for 2018, so before a permanent FTE is added, we could bring back additional details for council's consideration at that time.
Okay. Councillor Marsh?
Thank you. I'd like to move this recommendation, and I think it's we're going to be seeing that it's required going forward after 2018, but I'm glad that staff is being cautious and conservative in looking at this as a pilot. But, you know, as we saw in an earlier report, we do anticipate additional growth in each year going forward, not just with our LRT construction ramping down. I don't think that we're going to see a huge decrease. We're going to see a steady flow and potentially even an increase. So thank you.
Okay, Councillor Singh?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, I had my concerns with obviously the aspect of increasing our FTEs, be it for a pilot project, but that's okay, it's understandable. I think more information is necessary, and as the report lays out, this is being referred to the 2018 budget process, so obviously we will have ample time, and by that time, staff will have additional information if additional questions do arise. So I'm supportive in the direction that we're heading with the fee and the bylaw, but I think we will have that necessary debate at a later time for the FTE. I'll be supporting the recommendation.
Okay, thank you. I will make my comments. I have a little bit of an issue with this in particular. If we need a position filled, I think we should just get a position filled and do it the way it should be. And I don't know if this is the right approach on hitting private individuals that are trying to improve our city. And in particular, when I consider this the Bible now, which is the first 100 days of Mr. Chapman's, and part of this is for his CEO position. Part of it is the streamlining of development process, and to me, this is just another throwing something else at this to cause a little more frustration on that process. So for that, I'm not going to approve this. I'm not going to support this. So with that, it was moved by Councillor Marsh. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried.